Hello and welcome back to the Jet Press Podcast. My name is Justin Fried, and I'm joined as always by my good friend Mike Luciano. Mike, the draft is in the books. There are 7 new members of the New York Jets and many more coming with the UDFAs. How are you feeling today? How are you feeling on this post-Monday draft afternoon?
Better than Shedeur Sanders, I'll say that much.
All right, yeah.
It got to a point where I got buddies of mine that I know that aren't big fans of Shedeur. Even they were like, okay, this is getting kind of mean. This is getting kind of like.
I'm not a big fan of Shedeur either, but man, 5th round is crazy.
That was not football.
No, obviously not.
And I'm conflicted because he gets to go to the Browns, so maybe he has a chance to play, but also he's the 4th string quarterback. It's a Hackenberg situation.
I think
Dylan Gabriel was wild.
I said this on Twitter. I don't know if this is an overreaction. Dylan Gabriel going day 2 is the craziest day 2 NFL quarterback pick since Hackenberg. I think that's legitimate.
Even Tyler Shuck?
Oh, yeah. Shuck, at least I see the upside. What's the upside? But they drafted lefty Tommy DeVito. Like, what is Dylan Gabriel? What is the upside?
5'11", who's openly said he didn't want to play in a cold weather city because he's from Hawaii and went to Oregon and UCF.
That is an insane pick to me. I think Shedeur might start week 1. I don't know if that's a crazy take right now. He's fighting an uphill battle, but I think he's the best quarterback in that room. I know this isn't Shedeur Sanders Brown's podcast, but
it needs to be discussed.
Right. I think Shedeur might be the best quarterback in that room. So
we'll get into all of the Jets picks because there are a lot of new ones. A lot of them received universal acclaim. A lot of them did not and are being discussed, in my opinion, in a very weird way. We'll get into all of that. You know where to find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, Overcast, all the podcast platforms. We are there, and we're on YouTube. So if you want to support the show on YouTube, all you do is like the stream and subscribe. That really helps. And if you want to donate 99 cents, you get membership. You get priority to reply in the comments. That really helps. We have the thanks open for super chats. That really helps too. Let's just get right going here, Justin. This is going to be an action-packed show with a lot going on. We talked about Armand Membou.
I think this is the first Monday show ever.
It is, yes. So we didn't want to let this linger too long because it's the draft. So we got into Armand Membou on Friday. Universal acclaim. Everybody liked it. You liked it. We liked it. Hard to really find fault, but one of the safer picks, I feel like, and a good way for Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn to get their draft time started. Then the second round comes along, and they take LSU tight end Mason Taylor, son of former Jet Jason Taylor, of course, obviously primarily a Miami Dolphin, nephew of Joy Taylor, and as you mentioned before, he was the nephew of a player. He's the nephew of Hall of Fame linebacker Zach Thomas because Zach Thomas's sister is Jason Taylor's wife and Mason Taylor's mother. So looking at this, as we mentioned before, we talk about pick combos a lot. Tight end, tackle, or tackle tight end in that order. As we mentioned before, if they didn't get Arian Smith at number 42, which they could have, but if they didn't do that, it was really slim pickings at the offensive tackle spot. So they get their guy in Membou at 7, and then at 42 they get Mason Taylor, who a lot of people will say is the 3rd best tight end in this class. A guy who, if you look at him as a player, really he doesn't have anything that he does exceptionally well. He's fast, but not that fast. He's not that great of a blocker, not that amazing a receiver, but he just does everything so well for a tight end. He has such reliable hands, good over the middle, better wiggle than a lot of guys his size, blocks pretty well. A guy who Jeremy Rucker, when he came in, did not have this receiving upside, and Stone Smart is never going to be this good as a blocker. So I think instantly with number 42, you get a starting tight end, a guy who makes it now 2 A picks in a row, I feel like, with Taylor and Membou. We could talk about draft grades. I wouldn't call this like an A draft. I think it's like a B+ thing, but you got to weigh it heavily because these were 2 A picks right off the bat for Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a better start to this draft than the Jets had. I mean, even going into Azareye'h Thomas, who we'll talk about in a moment, day 1 and day 2, the Jets knocked it out of the park. Day 3 was a little more meh, and we'll get in some of those picks, and some of them may be outright not good, and others just whatever. This is a home run pick for the Jets. Like you mentioned, this is your starting tight end immediately. I know, normally how this stuff goes, Jeremy Ruckert will probably be listed as tight end 1 on the depth chart because he was there last year. I know it's a new regime, but normally they favor the holdovers. But I think by the time we're getting to the end of the summer, Mason Taylor should be the starting tight end. And if he's not, that would be a red flag to me. I'd be concerned if he can't beat out Jeremy Ruckert and beat out Stone Smart. Like you mentioned, he was Mr. Reliable for LSU. He does everything at a good level. I don't think there's any elite traits that jump out. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 3 tight end in the league, but he's a rock solid starting caliber tight end who comes in, I think, with a very NFL ready skill set. This is a high floor pick. He's 6'5", 251, can line up in line. Never went for over 100 yards in a game at LSU, but was consistently a piece in their passing game. He's the all-time leading receiver amongst all tight ends in LSU history, which, they don't have a stellar history of tight ends, but that says something, and that's a good program. So the Jets got a good player here in Mason Taylor. I'm very, very happy with how this draft started off with these first 2 picks. I think I said on Twitter, like, the dream scenario was Jaden Higgins. Higgins ended up going before the Jets pick. If not Higgins, probably would have been Mason Taylor. Probably would have said him. And the fact that he was on the board at 42, the board fell the right way. And again, you touched on this before, really drives home the fact that the Jets probably made the right move with Armand Membu, which is something that we already talked about a lot on that Friday stream. But, the tackle class outside of the top 3 and then outside of Simmons and Connerly, it really fell off after that. And, a guy like Ozzie Trapillo, who a lot of Jets fans are like, oh, maybe we can get him at 73. He went round 2. He went top 60. So he wasn't even going to be there. I think the Jets played the board correctly and got 2 instant day 1 starters with their first 2 picks. Can't be mad about that.
Michael in chat says tight end is super important for a running quarterback. It opens up options for play action, fake a handoff, gets his chip block off, and blocking for Fields. It's going to be very important.
Yeah,
I like that too. Now, looking at Mason Taylor, maybe this is going to be a little bit of a bold prediction, but I think during his rookie year, there's a very good chance he leads all tight ends in the receiving categories.
Ooh, that is a bold prediction. You know, Tyler Warren in Indy?
Let's just look at the top 4. So it was Colston Loveland, Tyler Warren, Mason Taylor, and Elijah Arroyo went to the Seahawks in the second round. I think Fannin went in the early third to the Browns. So but I'm going to count those top 4. Loveland is going to be the 5th, 6th option in the passing game for the Bears.
Sure.
I just don't think the volume's going to be there. I think Kmet starts the year as tight end 1.
I agree.
So I think that's going to be a tough hill for Loveland to overcome. Warren is probably going to start a lot and get a ton of targets, but Anthony Richardson is a lot of things as a quarterback. Accurate is not one of them.
Hey, you mean Daniel Jones. You mean starting quarterback.
Or Daniel Jones. And even if he does start right away, there's still Michael Pittman, and there's still Josh Downs, and there's still guys that I think are going to get targets before Tyler Warren.
They'll lean on Jonathan Taylor.
Jonathan Taylor is going to get, yep. Then you look at Seattle. Elijah Arroyo, I still don't think is going to start the year as tight end 1 because they still have Noah Fant. And this is going to be Cooper Kupp and all these different guys that got out there a wide receiver. That's going to be, I think, where Sam Darnold leans early on.
I was a little surprised with the Arroyo pick. I thought they were a big fan of AJ Barner. Maybe they are still. And Fant's probably gone after this year anyway. But
Barner doesn't have the receiving upside.
No,
so.
He doesn't.
That's if Jeremy Ruckert was supposed to be AJ Barner, and
yeah,
I don't think that he's going to really become that at this point. So you look at the Jets. Mason Taylor's going to start right away. I know Justin Fields a lot, but he's going to be the number 2 option in the passing game. I don't think that's crazy. He's going to be the number 2 option. There's Breece Hall there. I get that. Whoever wide receiver 2 is, maybe Josh Reynolds, maybe Allen Lazard, but I think it could be Mason Taylor because he's a guy who it reminds me, not to bring back another old Jet. Doesn't this feel like when they took Dustin Keller?
Everyone has made that comparison. That's been the comp. I mean, I don't know if that's like
he's the last good tight end the Jets have had.
I don't know if that's like a 1-to-1 comp. I think they're kind of different players, but yes, I think he can immediately have an impact like Dustin Keller did.
And Dustin Keller was a late first-round pick. So maybe I'm being bullish on Mason Taylor, especially because I thought 42, just the number 42 player I thought might have been a little rich for him on my board. I had him in kind of the 50s. But in terms of positional need, I mean, this is take a bow, Darren Muji. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what everybody expected them to do, I think, in the first 2 rounds.
This feels like one of those situations where the Jets were kind of sitting there really hoping that Mason Taylor was going to fall to 42. Because I thought it was a chance he'd go before that. I know you said
Will Johnson I would have considered.
Yeah, it's just impossible for us to say without knowing what their medical evaluation, but obviously talent alone. Like Will Johnson's an outstanding player, and he was still on the board at 42, right?
Yes, he was, and they passed on him.
When did he go?
He went to the Cardinals like a few picks later.
Yeah, I knew he went to the Cardinals. I forgot when it was. Yeah.
They had a low-key awesome draft.
Walter
Nolan and him and
dude, yeah, Nolan and Johnson's going to be 2 top like 15 players on a lot of people's boards, like 15, 20 players. But yeah, I think the Jets were probably sweating this one out as Mason Taylor was sliding down the board, hoping he was going to be available because that was the first tight end taken on day 2. There had not been a tight end taken in the class since 2014 when Tyler Warren went. So the fact that Mason Taylor made it all the way to 42, I think the Jets were kind of counting their lucky stars there. If that is that the phrase, maybe. They were hoping he was going to fall. I think he's again an instant day 1 starter. Love the pick a lot, and yeah, I don't know if there's a different direction that they could have gone there that I think would have received more widespread approval. I don't know if he's going to be, I think I'd still say Tyler Warren's probably going to lead all tight ends in production. I just think he's such an obvious fit in that Colts offense. They desperately needed a pat. Like they brought back Mo Cox, sure. They have Drew Ogletree, sure. Like that Tyler Warren is the instant impact starter there at tight end, and there's maybe more competition in that room. I think he probably still leads all tight ends in receiving yards, but in my bold predictions article, which you can go check that out, it's on JetPress YouTube or jetpress.com right now. My bold prediction for Mason Taylor, which it's not a bold prediction, but it was a prediction, was that he was going to be the Jets' second leading receiver this year. Which, look, he's a day 2 rookie tight end. That's not normal. Like that's not a common thing that happens with day 2 rookie tight ends. But I mean, his competition is Josh Reynolds and Alan Lazard and Tyler Johnson. Honestly, Breece Hall is probably his biggest competition.
Yeah, it's probably Breece.
So I think he has a chance to make an immediate impact and love this pick. It was no complaints.
Cisco says, do you think we should have taken a quarterback in the 5th?
Well, if it was Shedeur, maybe. I don't think I do not.
Even if you don't like him, the value there would be.
I will say though, I think even if Shedeur was available in round 7 and the Jets had a 7th round pick, I don't think they take him. The vibe we got was
he needed to go. I know there are rumors the Eagles were going to take him. He needed to go to a team like that if he's going to get picked that late, where there's no chance he's going to be the starter. Because now in Cleveland, they have 3 guys ahead of him. Every time that quarterback in front of him is not amazing, the fan base too. Like I saw multiple tweets from Browns players like, "Oh, we're ready to get to work, Shedeur. We love you." I'm like, I think Dylan Gabriel feels. You got picked ahead of him.
I mean, it's fair though. Like. Shedeur Sanders is absolutely a better player than Dylan Gabriel. But, I would have been shocked if the Jets took Sanders at any point. I just, look, this is not going to be meant to be a shot at Shedeur Sanders, but the Jets moved on from Aaron Rodgers because they kind of wanted to avoid the media circus and avoid having a quarterback who was kind of, treated differently than the rest of the players in the roster, even if that's no fault of Shedeur Sanders. I think it partially is, but partially it's obviously his dad and that whole situation. But I think Aaron Glenn and the Jets wanted to avoid that at all costs. And by all accounts, I think the meeting specifically he had with the Jets went very poorly based on, I believe it was Ian Rappaport reported that.
What was he doing? How do you interview that poorly?
The vibe I get is that he just was very off-putting and he went in kind of disinterested and almost like it wasn't worth his time. That's kind of what the feedback has been. We're not in those meetings.
There's famous stories of Dion doing that, but also I think he interviewed with the Giants. He's like, "Oh, you're picking 10. I'm not going to be there," and he left. But I mean,
Dion was able to do that. Unfortunately, Shedeur was not. Shedeur was not the talent that his father was. But I don't know. That's not our thing.
He was, and he overplayed his hand.
Right. I also want to make it clear, I'm not in those meetings. I'm not in those interviews. I have no idea. That is the interpretation of the people that were in those meetings. So I have no idea. But yeah, I don't think the Jets would have taken Sanders. As far as quarterback at all, no, I don't think so. I've been pretty vocal about that I did not want the Jets to draft a quarterback in this class. They brought back Tyrod Taylor. They have Jordan Travis. He'll be competing with Adrian Martinez. And then they just signed Brady Cook, who, look, as far as UDFA quarterbacks go, it's probably one of the better ones you're going to find. It's obviously
I think he's the best UDFA quarterback.
Yeah, I think in terms like he has I think he's an NFL quarterback. Like there's a lot of stuff he has to clean up, but he has the arm talent. He has the athlete. Like he's a good athlete. Why can't he be an NFL?
All this Luther Burns slander, and now we get because the offense sucked, and now we get his quarterback and his right tackle.
I know we talked all about like, oh man, that Missouri offense, that passing game sucked, and it's like, hey, look, their quarterback.
Brady Cook's good.
We could talk about that another time when we talk more about UDFAs, but.
Yeah. Gregory Harrison, 2nd and 3rd round left me scratching my head. The 3rd round, but the 2nd?
You were scratching your head at the pick of Mason Taylor? I feel like that was the most consensus obvious selection.
Yeah, I was like find me a guy that graded that below like an A-.
I'm going to guess Gregory was like a Harold fan in truther because there's a lot.
He wanted like a wide receiver at that point. Or
I think I'm going to guess there's a lot of Harold fan in truthers who are like, he's the top tight end. He's like a top 2 tight end class.
That's the one bit of criticism that they didn't take an offensive tackle, but also they signed 3. So
I have criticism about the class as a whole, but we can get to that later when we talk about more day 3.
Let's talk about the 3rd round pick, Florida State cornerback Azareye'h Thomas, who I remember when I did my big board, he was like a late 50s guy for me. I thought I was low on him. I had him going in the early 3rd round of the Raiders, and I literally said out loud making that, there's no way that's going to happen.
You are lower than, like, a lot of media had him 2nd round.
Yeah, I thought the latest he would go was like the Bills in the late 50s. That's where I thought he was. I had him look on my big board. I had him at like 52. I think that's because I had concerns about the speed, which is really the only concern we have with him right now.
Right.
They get him at 73. Talk about a great value pick. Now the concerns are, again, 4.58 40, not what you want. Only 20 years old, so that's good because you get a lot of developmental upside with him. I think what the big thing about Thomas, I think he's a very big key to what the Jets are going to do schematically. I think they don't take him unless they're going to do a lot of press man, because I just don't think he has the athleticism to do a lot of zone stuff. But if you put him at the line, I mean, he's 6'2", 200, really long arms, very aggressive, pretty good tackler for a guy that big. He could have quit in the middle of that Florida State season. They were 2-10. He did not. I like that out of him. This is a guy who I don't know if he's going to play right away as a rookie, because really Brandon Stevens is the X factor. We don't know what Brandon Stevens is going to be. We don't know if he's going to be a safety or a nickel or an outside corner. We don't know what they're going to do with him, or everything. We don't know. Let's hypothetically say, I know that Brandon Stevens at safety is not an ideal move because you don't want to pay $12 million for a safety, and then safety is Brandon Stevens. But let's say they do that to accommodate this guy. That's a starter at 73 with great value and room to grow. And if I we like Aaron Glenn. We have some doubts about him. If I trust him on anything, it's cornerback development. And this seems like an Aaron Glenn kind of guy. Very physical, very aggressive. I think better ball skills than people will give him credit for. Maybe not the ones you want for a guy that big, but it's getting there. He's only 20 years old. NFL bloodlines, too. His brother actually plays for the Cowboys. He's one of their best special teamers. So I'm looking at this pick, and I thought with 1, 2, and 3 A picks in a row, which is why I'm confused. A lot of the draft grades are B plus stuff. If you weigh these picks like that, A, Membu, Taylor, Thomas, that's a great way to start a draft.
I think there's 2 ways to look at this pick, right? And I'll start with the very optimistic way, because I love this pick. First of all, let me make this clear. This is another, damn near A pick. I won't say it's like an A+A because it wasn't as quite the need that like Mason Taylor was, where they got maybe best player available at their most important position. This is arguably best player available at a position that is a very, it's a premium position. Just the need wasn't there as much. But I think the reason that Azareye'h Thomas fell is more so because like, he's not a very versatile player. He's extremely you have to play him in this role. He's not a slot guy at all. He's going to be a boundary corner. He's not going to play in his own heavy defense. He's going to be in a man-heavy defense, specifically press man. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of teams that play that. So he's really not going to be a scheme fit for a lot of teams. But if this is the role, or this is the defense that the Jets want to run, buddy, that's unbelievable value, because the talent that he possesses, and if you put him in that defense, I think he can be a week 1 starter. And now I don't know if I'd go as far as to predict that, but my prediction that I put on that article that I maybe I'll reference it a few times was that he'd be a starter by the end of the year, or at least by 2026. I just think he is a perfect Aaron Glenn style player, and it makes sense that they went this direction. I don't think this is a situation where the Jets were looking at Azareye'h Thomas at 73. Maybe they wanted Kyle Williams, who went to the Patriots a few picks earlier. But I think when they got there at 73, they looked at their board and they're like, this is a guy they might have a borderline like early round 2 grade on him, maybe even higher, legitimately, just for like the defense that they want to run, assuming that is the defense they're going to run. They might have had a very, very high grade on him. And I think they just ran into a situation where like, we can't pass on this guy. So love the value, love the player, love the fit in his defense. The downside, or the pessimism that I'll provide, is I already was not a fan of the Brandon Stevens signing when they made that move. I made that clear at the time. Of all the moves the Jets made this offseason, it's the only one that I've been like, I really don't like this one. They paid him 3 years, $36 million to a guy who was, he was statistically one of the worst cornerbacks in the NFL last year, and they gave him very good cornerback money. Now I have even more questions, because you drafted Azareye'h Thomas. Well, Brandon Stevens is here for minimum the next 2 years. You can't. I know. What was it? James said something in chat. I hope they release.
I hope they release him next week. And
They cannot. They can't release him realistically until 2020 after 2026. So he's locked in for the next 2 years. I'm pretty sure. And if you're drafting Azareye'h Thomas, now you're either going to say, all right, there's one of really three scenarios. Either one, Azareye'h Thomas is now sitting on the bench for the first 2 years of his rookie contract, which they could do that. I don't think that's the best allocation of resources. And I also think he's probably going to be ready to play before that, but you could do that. Two, you have him start over Stevens, and Stevens ends up being a backup corner, which now you're paying $12 million a year to a guy who is going to be a backup corner. That's a disaster. Or the third option, which a lot of people have mentioned, is you move Brandon Stevens to corner. You could do that with Azareye'h Thomas, or to safety. You could do that with Azareye'h Thomas as well, but I think it'd probably be Stevens. Stevens does have experience playing safety. He played it a bit at SMU and did it a little bit earlier in his Ravens career. And
they moved him around a little bit.
They did. And look, I was covering the Ravens at that time. I watched him play safety. He wasn't very good. He wasn't. Not that he was particularly good at corner. He wasn't good at that either, but he wasn't a particularly good safety. And the bigger concern I would have, aside from the fact that, again, I don't think he'd be an upgrade over Tony Adams at safety. I'm not going to lie. I don't think he would. But even if you do that, you're already overpaying him to play corner. You paying him $12 million to play safety? That'd be egregious. Like, it's already an overpay paying him to play this position. You're now asking him to move to a different position, and you're paying him to play a less valuable position a lot of money.
For comparison, say Talanoa Hufanga got $13 million a year, and Cam Bynum got $15.
That's absurd. Like,
they're going to play Brandon Stevens 12.
And that's the issue I have, where a lot of people are like, oh, just move to safety, just play your best 11 players, and I agree with that.
Yeah, I get that, but
why? Like, if you're in the situation already, sure, maybe the best move is to move him to safety, but why sign him then? Like this is a retrospective. Like, it's not even like a hindsight 2020 thing, because I said it at the time, and I think a lot of people said it at the time. So that's my concern. It's not really about this pick, because the pick is very good, but it just calls into question, why the hell did you sign Brandon Stevens to that contract? And it makes it worse, because the Jets signed 2 free agents to multi-year contracts, right? Wasn't it just Fields and
Stevens? Yeah,
that's it. Stevens got the most the most years of any guy they signed, and the most non-quarterback money, because quarterback money is in a different category. That was their guy. They didn't do anything else in free agency. They signed Andre Sisco to a 1-year deal. Like, they were like, all right, if we're going to sign one guy to a multi-year deal, this is our guy. And it just looks like the worst move of the offseason. That's the concern I have. But as far as the pick in a vacuum is concerned, love the pick, love the value here. I think he's going to be a long-term starter for the Jets.
I like the idea of drafting a guy. First off, we didn't allow any touchdowns last year at Florida State. Yes. And I guess this is a good problem to have, because there's no such thing as too many good defensive backs.
Well, do they have too many good defensive backs?
Well, they have at least one.
Well, yes, they have at least,
2.
Michael Carter as well, for sure.
They have 2.
And I think Andre Sisco, I could put it. I know he had a rough
Cisco's decent. They think Thomas will be good.
Yep.
Tony Adams is halfway okay.
Fine, and maybe, look.
I guess the better way, if you're gonna load up at a position, I don't hate a cornerback and cornerbacks coach loading up a cornerback.
On the Brandon Stevens thing one more time, like, I get why the Jets. It wasn't just like, oh, let's just sign the worst player in football and give him this money. The reasoning was, like, they thought he could be a good fit in their scheme. Like, they thought they could maximize him, and the potential they saw on tape was, hey, he's always in the right position. He just can't get his head turned around. And he was, he would consistently give up tight coverage catches all the time because he couldn't get his head turned around. They're hoping they could fix that. I have my doubts, but that was the reason they signed him. But so it wasn't just like, hey, let's sign, the Buster Screen of the NFL. No offense to Buster Screen. But, well, you know what? No offense to Buster Screen. He's had an interesting post NFL career, but
to say the least.
Yeah.
Now let's get to the one I would say bad pick. Now I will say too, as we're talking about Georgia receiver Arian Smith, who got picked in the 4th round.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the problems I have with the way this pick. And again, I will say I don't want to say I don't like this pick, but because they got a wide receiver, and I actually probably like him a little more than most guys do. But the value was not adequate, and there were guys that were better prospects that they passed on. Here are the problems I have with the way it's being discussed. Number one, I just wrote this for the Jet Press. Mel Kiper gave this draft a B after giving all 3 of their first picks an A. So really, do you dislike Arian Smith that much where the negativity from that is outweighing the positivity of the first 3 picks? That's one of the problems I have with
It's
it.
a quote. I forget who said it, but who in the hell is Mel Kiper?
That was the Colts GM after they did not take Trent Dilfer.
That was Polian, right?
No,
Or
was it Bill? No, it was might not have been Bill Polian. It was somebody else, but
I'll look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, but I will say though, Mel Kiper ended up being he wanted them to take Dilfer, which was a problem.
It was Bill Tobin. My bad.
Yeah. Now the problem was they took Marshall Faulk with the first pick that year, which that's an amazing pick.
Yeah.
They took him too. Then with the 5th pick, they took Trev Alberts, who played 29 games and had 4 sacks. And Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. So Mel Kiper was right. And then 2 picks later was Bryant Young, who's a Hall of Famer, so that probably was a better pick. But anyway, Arian Smith. As Garrett Goodlander, here's the other problem too I want to say before we get to Garrett's comment, is apparently, like, I know that, Jets, that there's more film out there and more accessible scouting stuff, but like there were a lot of Jets fans who learned about Jalen Royals the minute that they didn't pick Jalen Royals to take Arian Smith. And now it's the greatest injustice in the world that they didn't do that. I'm like, okay, can we calm it? It's a day 3. If he becomes wide receiver 4, that's a very good pick. As Gilby says, I like Arian Smith, but I would have preferred Royals from Utah State. I don't even know if I like it, but
I don't like it.
Here's where I see where it could work. Is, as Garrett Goodlander says, he dropped 10 of 58. Yes, he had 48 catches and 10 drops.
Yep.
That is not a drop problem. Alan Lazard has a drop problem. This is something different. This is unprecedented almost.
Honestly, Lazard's, I think, had about the same drop rate the last 2 years. They're drop epidemics. That's what I would call it.
Yeah, drop epidemics, drop sicknesses.
Yeah.
He's only 6 foot 180, so you're not going to have him do a lot scheme-wise. Here's where I get it. People, I think Justin too, said, Aaron Glenn did the whole Jameson Williams thing because, that was the logic of Jameson Williams had drop problems, not as bad as this by any stretch.
He compared him to Jameson Williams, like not compared him, but compared the situation to Jameson Williams.
Yeah. And then he was like, well, I could fix that. And I get why people were making fun of that comparison, but he doesn't think Arian Smith's going to be as good as Jameson Williams. He took Jameson Williams in the first round. He took Arian Smith 110th. But I think he said we can use the same process to improve it.
Right.
Which I get. 9.2 RAS. If you look at this, 38-inch vertical, 10-inch broad jump, and good agility stuff, like his 3-cone specifically. Mm-hmm. So when I look at a good 3-cone and a good shuttle time, I know he wasn't used as kind of like an over-the-middle slant kind of guy, but I think he has the potential to. And if you look at Arian Smith too, he ran his 4.36 40-yard dash honestly is not representative of him. This guy was a freak track athlete, multiple-time All-American for track. He broad jumped. He long jumped, 25 feet in high school, which 29 feet's the record. That's insane.
He's absurd.
I do have it on somewhat good authority too that 4.36 that he has been timed multiple times in like 4.25.
Damn.
And that a lot of people thought he could have broken the record for combat for like Xavier Worthy's 4.21. Like, it's not an exaggeration to say when he gets in the league, he's probably going to be one of the 10 fastest players in the league in terms of just pure speed.
Sure.
Now, I don't think this is a good pick. If they took him in the 6th round, I'd be very happy with this pick. I don't like the fact they took him this early because I do think that there's not a lot he can do, and the drop problem is such a big problem. But again, if you're looking at, you can teach, you can work with drop problems and work with route running. I think people are underestimating the level of speed this guy has. And I think how the Jets at least play. Like, can you at least see a scenario Justin Fields just chucks in Arian Smith, runs and goes and gets it?
Yeah, I could see him dropping it. No.
There you go.
Oh, sorry. No, I can.
There you go. But like, I guess like I would have picked Royals or Eligayo Maynor. I know you don't love him, but I think I was surprised he was still there.
Yeah, I would have taken him over.
But I get it. Like, I don't think this is the end of the world here. Like, there's a world where he becomes a very useful NFL player.
Yeah, it's not. It's a 4th round pick. It isn't the end of the world. I will point out that of all the positive things you just said about him, all the positive traits, you didn't mention one thing about playing football. It was only, hey, look, here's how fast he runs.
He led Georgia in receiving yards last year.
Lead Georgia. I will start with the positive, right? With the one thing that I think he is very good at on a football field. I do think, aside from just being really fast and being able to run in a straight line, he is a very good tracker of the football. And I think he can become a genuinely possibly viable deep threat because of it.
And the Senior Bowl, he was very good. So.
Yeah, he had a good performance in the Senior Bowl. And again, like you said, he led Georgia in receiving yards last year at 817 yards at Georgia. Like, that's nothing to scoff at. This isn't like a guy they got who's running, sprints at Montana State. Like, this is
Remember Robert Foster?
Alabama, right?
He was like a 5-star recruit. He had like 10 catches in college, and he still got picked because of that.
Yes.
Like, this is not that. He had something on tape.
Right. So there's something there. Now, I prefaced it with that. I don't like this pick at all. And I was very vocal about it at the time. And look, I know you're like, oh yeah, a lot of fans don't know who the hell this dude is. You know how that works. Like, there's a couple of people that know who he is. And I know who he is. I'm not an expert, right? There's people who watched every snap.
It's just the pearl clutching of like, I can't believe this is the end. I can't believe it. It's like,
people
let them take a heat check after 3 apex.
People have the accounts that they think they know. They think these accounts know what they're talking about. Maybe the Jet Press is one of those. I don't know. I'm not the expert. I don't claim to be the expert. Don't look at me as the expert, but I know I'm saying that to people listening to us on a podcast. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I watched him enough because this is a guy who the Jets brought in for a top 30 visit. And so I was like, all right, there's a good chance they take a flyer on him. I was thinking, late day 3, maybe UDFA. I see the vision, kind of like they signed Tyler Harrell last year. I don't know if you remember him as the UDFA. Different situation because he had an absurd injury history and barely had any production. At least Arian Smith had 1 year of good production at Georgia. But it was kind of like, this guy can run fast. Maybe let's teach him how to play wide receiver. That's what the Jets are doing with Arian Smith. Because, look, I'm willing to overlook drop issues. I think drops are a little overrated. And I've said that before. I think it's just an overrated statistic because a lot of times the league leaders in receiving yards and the top receivers in football lead the league in drops. I'm willing to overlook a drop problem if you are an elite separator.
It's not that as bad as his is. Like, this is an outlier even among that.
An 18% drop rate last year, that's not going to cut it. That is Allen Lazard level. I think Lazard has had that pretty much the last 2 years. But yeah, I call it the Deontay Johnson rule. Look, Deontay Johnson, I know he just torpedoed his career this last year. Before this
was one of my rename that rule.
He was one of my favorite receivers in football because, yes, he had the drop issues. And it was frustrating at times. You could ask any Steelers fan. It was very frustrating. But this man gets open. He would consistently rank, I think from 2021 to 2024 or 2023, he was like the #1 player in ESPN's open score amongst all wide receivers in the NFL. And of course, obviously, he can't catch passes. So that's why that kept him from being an all-pro at the NFL level. But he was still a very good wide receiver because of that. With Arian Smith, you don't get that. He's not a very good separator. I think he is a straight up just downfield deep threat who is good at tracking the ball, but he played 80% of his snaps out wide at Georgia. He's not going to be a slot guy. I know you said maybe he could be a slot guy at the NFL level. I don't think he's a good enough route runner to do that right now. And I also think he's not physical enough. He gets bodied.
He's never going to be just
no, he's not. He gets bodied off his routes. He can't beat press. He's if Robbie Anderson was less developed, was less refined. Maybe Robbie
shorter because Robbie Anderson, part of the appeal was he was so
and
big.
Shorter than Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson was like 6'3", 6'4". He was skinny as hell, but he was 6'3", 6'4". Arian Smith's 6 foot, right? He's 6 foot 181 or whatever it is. I see a guy who is not a very good route runner, is not physical, can't block, has extreme drop issues, also has an injury history that people haven't talked about a lot. He has, what did he do? He had surgery on his wrist in 2020, tore his meniscus in his knee in 2020. He had turf toe that made him miss the first half of 2021, broke his fibula in 2021, had a high ankle sprain and a torn ligament in 2022. He has a long injury history too. Like, that's another aspect that I think people have not talked about. So I really don't see workable traits with him other than, hey, he's really fast and he can track the ball well. There's way too many red flags for me to even consider drafting him before round 6 is the earliest that I would have been like, all right, sure, it's worth a flyer. Because once you get into round 6, round 7, those are almost UDFA guys at that point where it's like, hey, we're drafting guys because they could do one thing well. And he can do one thing well, but he can't do anything else well. And there's just other red flags, even aside from that with, the injuries. And it just makes it a really difficult projection to me because it's also like, again, people keep talking about the drops, right? The only problem with him was he can't catch the ball. All right, maybe we can work on that. He's never going to be good probably, but maybe we can, make it less of a problem. I don't think he's a wide receiver. Like, I just don't think you play the wide receiver position well enough outside of the drops to be a viable round 4 candidate.
I was about to say, like, if he had average hands, how does that change your evaluation?
Oh, round 4 is fine then. Yeah, the average hands. I mean, I still don't love it because I don't love guys that are one trick. Like he's a half trick pony. That's what I would call it. He's a half trick pony because
Let's say what, because
he's a deep
again, like like the level of athlete he is, I think, is being underrated when discussing him.
That maybe, but also like Salim Hakeem was fast as hell. Like Stephen Hill was fast as hell. Devin Smith had the knee injuries.
Devin Smith got hurt, yeah, but I can't believe. I'll go to my people always do. Oh, you want to change your evaluations? I would not change a damn thing about Devin Smith. I thought he was going to be I thought he was it.
I know. I wish, man, but I don't know. I really, and again, combine that with the fact that there were just other wide receivers or other positions that they could have.
Chris B right here lists a couple that were better. Torrey Horton, Nick Nash, Tez Johnson, Jalen Royals. They were all on the board when Smith came off.
Yeah. Nick Nash, I think, is a more complete wide receiver than Arian Smith. And Nick Nash was playing quarterback for 4 years.
And he went undrafted, I think.
I think he went undrafted, yeah.
Yeah.
I would have rather taken Nick Nash than Arian Smith. We mentioned him briefly when we did our final mock draft, Arian Smith. Because they brought him in for top 30, and I was like, man, I don't want this dude. Like, I don't want it. Look, I hope he will do well. I will be rooting for his success, and I hope he shuts me up and proves me wrong and proves everyone wrong. Because a lot of people are shitting on his pick, and I feel bad for him because I'm sure after a moment like this, when you're drafted and it's the best moment of your life, if you go on social media and imagine everybody in that fan base is like, oh, this dude like a 4th round pick. Everyone's like, this guy sucks. He ruined the whole draft.
Why didn't they take Jalen Royals, who got hurt last year? Why did they value 2023 Utah State film?
Right. Like I feel bad for him, but the criticism is fair. Like I get it. I don't like the pick at all. It's easily my least favorite pick of this draft.
What about Malachi Moore, who they traded up for? Traded up a couple times in this draft. No 6th or 7th round picks. And then with Malachi Moore from Alabama, who I wouldn't call it an A pick because of positional need, but he reminds me a lot of Kevin Winston in that, or Siobhan Ravello went in the 3rd round. If they didn't get hurt because he dealt with some injury things, I think we're talking about Malachi Moore as kind of like an early round 3 guy.
Wow. And
I think that's really good because a lot of the problems with Malachi Moore were he got banged up a little bit and he was slow. I mean, he ran a 4.57.
He's a smaller guy. He's 5'11", 196.
But also,
5'7", yeah.
He has. I mean, you don't like doing helmet scouting a lot, but outside of D. Milliner, Jet, who went 9, Alabama defensive back is very often a very safe bet to make. This guy was a 2-time team captain. Played a lot even before that. I mean, he started as a freshman.
Yes, he did. He was freshman All-American.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Nick Saban has this position that he calls the star position. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like a Deion Buchanan smaller linebacker. Sometimes it's a nickel guy. He moves it around a little bit. It was Brian Branch for a while, but it was also Malachi Moore, a 4-year contributor at Alabama, a 2-time team captain. Very good hands, very smart, good tackler for his size. Very, very low floor guy. And
high floor.
High floor guy, excuse me. Yeah, so we
very
like
low floor. Low ceiling, low floor.
Arian Smith is low floor. Malachi, but high ceiling. Malachi Moore is high floor. Looking at this, he's obviously not going to start at safety. I don't think he's going to start at nickel corner or anything like that, but I think he gives you so much versatility. It's not good for a guy maybe like a Quantez Stiggers or a Jark Bernard Converse. Probably not ideal for those guys, but if we're looking at a guy who he could do so many different things, and it seems like Aaron Glenn does value versatility. That's, I think, part of why Stevens got the contract he did. I think that Moore, not only is he a good value pick, but he's a guy where if by week 18 he's playing maybe half of the defensive snaps, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, this guy was starting as a freshman at Alabama, and then gets hurt. Other guys come in kind of slow. Like he is one injury and a faster 40 time away from being like a top 64 pick. So I think that's very good value for the Jets here.
Brian points out that there has never been a successful Malachi or other variant spelling of the name in the NFL. I believe, to my knowledge, at least if Pro Football Reference isn't lying to me, there have been 3 Malachis, or there have been 2 Malachis to have played in an NFL game at this time. One is Malachi Corley. Do you know who the other one is?
Malachi Starks.
No, he hasn't played yet.
Oh yeah, he's coming.
I will give you a hint. He played
Malachi Dupree in 2018.
Yes. Oh, you just looked it up. You told us. I was going to say, like, whoa, you remembered Malachi Dupree. Yeah, LSU star. I remember Malachi Dupree. Mike Zimmelman says, great point by Mike about Malachi Moore's reputation around Alabama. I like the swing with AG and Steve Wilkes' background with secondaries and Glenn's history with Brian Branch. And Brian Branch was somebody that Glenn specifically brought up. He mentioned that he spoke to Brian Branch about the Malachi Moore pick before that they made the selection. And Branch, there's a lot of, I don't want to say similarities between his prospects because Branch is better and Branch is a better athlete and just more physically talented than Malachi Moore. But Moore was the first true freshman defensive back to start for Alabama in the first game of the year since Minka Fitzpatrick. So there was a lot of pedigree when he came to Alabama. There was a lot of hype around him. He was a 4-star recruit. Immediately was able to start. Then Brian Branch came in and actually kind of took over the starting role. So Moore he started his true freshman year, and then Branch comes in. He still really kind of started his second year. But in 2022, he was more of like a backup kind of. He still played some on defense, but he wasn't a full-time starter at that star position when Branch came in. And then Branch was drafted, and then they moved him back into the starting lineup. So there's comparisons there. There's history between those two guys. I love the pick. Of all the day 3 picks that the Jets made, this is the one I think that has the best chance to immediately pay dividends. I don't think Arian Smith or the other guys that they drafted that we're going to talk about in a moment are going to make a big impact in 2025. I think Malachi Moore has a chance to win a starting job in the summer, let alone, come middle of the season, he's a starter. I think the prediction that I put in that article was that he is going to be a 2026 week 1 starter for the Jets. The safety position is one of those positions where you can very easily find starters on day 3. And there's a lot of teams that around the NFL that have day 3 safeties.
Tony Adams was an undrafted free agent.
Tony Adams was undrafted. It happens a lot. I mean, remember Antonio Allen for Jets fans?
Andre Cisco was a 3rd rounder. It happens.
Was a 3rd rounder. It's very
he started right away with Jacksonville. So
and Moore projects to me as one of those guys that you mentioned, the high floor. I think he is going to be a good NFL player. I don't think he's ever be a star, but if you're looking at positional value and saying, hey, look, we can get this guy on day 3 who he can come in and probably start maybe 3 out of the 4 years of his rookie contract, and maybe we can even retain him for cheap after that. Like that. That's how you build a roster. I think this is absolutely what you want to do with the safety position. You don't have to go a Malachi Starks or a Niki Menwari on day 1 or day 2. You can go a Malachi Moore here in the 4th round. And, the Jets traded up for Moore as well. So they clearly thought highly of him. Easily my favorite day 3 pick that the Jets made.
This is one of my favorite day 3 picks in years for the Jets. I really like this pick.
Yeah, I think it's a good pick.
I wouldn't maybe an A-.
I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate that.
And then that's A. That's 4 out of 5 got A. Yeah. And then Arian Smith.
And also another thing.
We should make the class an F because of Arian Smith. Give me a break, man.
Another thing that's going to help him immediately make an impact: 486 career special team snaps. He was a special teamer, can immediately step in and play a role there. And again, you mentioned the experience: 64 career games at Alabama. If you play 64 games at Alabama, you're doing something right. Like you're
awesome.
Yeah, you are a good football player. 46 starts over 5 years at Alabama, 64 career games. Was also 2nd team All-American last year and 1st team All-SEC. So it's not like he was like a nothing starter at Alabama. He was one of the best players in that defense.
It's one of those things where you look at his numbers and you even look at his tape, like, okay, and then you read all his accolades and you're like, why is this guy not like? You look at all these, and then you look at the consensus boards, 150. It's like, well, what am I missing here?
I'm sorry. I got to get to a comment, Mike, that I just saw. I don't know if you see in this comment, but I have to address it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kristen says, Justin reminds me, looks like a Matt or Nick Jackson. Yeah. Tag team. Yeah. He's saying I look like the Young Bucks. I'm a wrestling fan, Chris. I very well know the Young Bucks.
I know the big names. I don't know that deep. So.
In fact, they are, hold on. I know you don't know AEW people. They're like one of the best. Yeah. They're considered like one of the best tag teams ever. Fun fact, Jason, our coworker, Jason, he's like childhood friends with, or like childhood family friends with the Young Bucks. I've actually interviewed the Young Bucks.
I didn't know that. And I've worked with the guy for years. I didn't know that.
There you go. I've also interviewed the Young Bucks. So fun fact there. I don't know where you're getting this. I feel like I don't look like them. And also I don't have, I have a beard, kind of. It's not a good beard.
Oh, beard's subjective, really. But
damn, man. Listen, I wish I could grow a better beard. All right.
I can't either.
I wish I could, but I don't really, I used to have sideburns at one point in my life. But thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
Malachi Black is my guy. So let's move on.
He came back to WWE. He just came back literally on Friday.
Awesome. So Let's move on to their 2 fifth-round picks, both from the same defense, and both of whom have a Jason Taylor connection, because Jason Taylor,
Yes.
Mason Taylor's father, was the Miami defensive ends coach, so he knows one of these guys very well, and another one of these guys kind of well. Francisco Mauigoa gets picked 162nd. Kiko he goes by.
Kiko.
Now, it's funny, too, because his younger brother, Francis, is probably going to be a top 5 pick next year. He's like the Armand Membu of next year's class.
Can I say that pisses me off that they had kids named Francis and Francisco?
Francis and Francisco, yeah.
Wait, what's the parent?
They have a younger brother's name is just Fran. And then
no, the dad's name is not. I'm not going to offend anyone to pronounce that. It's a Samoan name, but it's definitely not Francisco.
Let me take a crack at it. I'm sure I could get it.
It is FA'Aliali.
There are so many vowels in that. It is ridiculous.
There's a lot of A's. I don't want to.
There are 3 consonants in that 10-letter word.
Yeah, Telesia is his mother. That's
Fa'alialia.
Fa'alialia.
That's what I'm going with.
That's the dad. So I don't know where they go.
Right. So yeah, there's Francisco and Francis, and then I'm sure Fran and Fur and F are coming after him.
What's interesting about
they just keep chopping letters off the back.
What's interesting about Francisco Mauigoa is that he not only was born in American Samoa, he went to high school there. He went to high school in American Samoa. He didn't move to the States to the mainland states until much later. Until I think he was almost in college. I think he went to a year of like prep school or whatever. He went to IMG Academy. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
In Florida. But then, he spent most of his life in American Samoa.
And this guy is, if you were to just take like old school 2-down thumper in a dictionary, that is this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like a Frankie Louvu athletic trait thing. But
that's the comparison I saw.
Because he's Samoan. But
exactly. That's the lazy. Or like, remember Harvey Lange?
Yes.
Weirdly, I interviewed Harvey Lange too, but anyway, go on.
But he's a guy who the coverage skills are probably not going to be there. The athleticism, like good straight line speed, but laterally he just doesn't move as like you want to see him. But if he needed to play, I mean, Jamin Sherwood was a 5th-round pick. I know he was a safety that moved inside, but you never know with these linebackers. Linebackers is another position you get day 3 value, like inside linebacker especially. This guy, man, does this guy hit hard. Hits hard, smart guy, capable of shedding blocks for a guy who's 233 very well. Zaire Barnes, I think, might need to start looking elsewhere because this guy is an immediate replacement with a legitimate ceiling. I'm not banging the table. This is an amazing pick, but he's definitely a draftable player and a guy that I think could really slot in well in this defense.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. I mean, just a little bit of his background. He was teammates with Cam Ward at multiple stops because he was with him in Washington State. And then Cam Ward, or he transferred to Miami in 2023.
He transferred, then Cam went.
Cam transferred in 2024, so they were teammates at multiple stops. But yeah, look,
I will say though, Justin, he has an older brother. His name is Frederick, so they did not do the naming thing all the time.
Well, they did all the F's.
They did FR, but yeah.
And I guess the dad begins with an F, so they went.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not naming him Ali Jr. here, so.
Fa'alialia Jr.
Fa'alialia Jr. Yeah, so.
But yeah, I think there's genuine upside to him. And he comes into a situation where, listen, the Jets, I think, outside of Jamie and Sherwood, very uncertain linebacker future. Quincy Williams on the end of the last year of his deal, there were rumors that he could get traded during the draft. And we might have we might have passed the point where that's going to happen. But I don't know. Like, he's still playing on a dirt cheap contract. I would not blame him at all if he was not particularly, pleased with his contract situation at the moment. So who knows what the future holds for him? And they don't really have a third linebacker. I mean, for that job, Mauigoa is coming in and he's competing with who? Zaire Barnes, Marcelino McCrary Ball, like Jackson Sermon. Like they got nobody in that room right now. So I think there's a real chance he can compete for that third linebacker job. And, the coverage skills are probably never going to be there. I also think he is too inconsistent as a tackler. Had a lot of missed tackles there. So, not great in coverage, not a great tackler. That's a tough sell, but there's a reason he was a 5th-round pick. I think the ceiling is there for him to develop into a potential starter, and maybe he already comes in and he's that third linebacker and he's playing 15% of snaps. I think that could happen.
He's a guy too where I think he's a guy who could benefit from like NFL level speed testing and speed improvement kind of thing. If he's like a tick faster, I think there's a path where he starts.
Yeah.
And we got one pick left here, and it is another Miami player coached by Jason Taylor specifically.
Yes.
And he's a guy where the pick originally happened. I go, all right, and whatever kind of thing, right? Like, it looks like a decent player, pretty adequate value here. The more I look into him, the more I like this guy. In fact, I probably would have taken him over every day 3 pick except Malachi Moore.
Whoa.
And that's Tyler Barron, who was at Tennessee, was supposed to be, when he was a very high-profile transfer, was supposed to dominate, didn't really do that. But here's something that I found out watching him, because I remember he only had 5.5 sacks listed. I'm like, that can't be right. I saw him be very productive as a pass rusher. Pro Football Focus does not count half sacks. They give you a full sack, even if you get a half sack. He had 10 in their eyes.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
So he had 10 for Pro Football Focus. So because of that, and not only that, against Power 5 teams, pressure rate was almost identical to Abdul Carter. And he's bigger than Abdul Carter. So a guy who is not going to be a great athlete. I've seen a lot of Michael Clemens comparisons because he's like 6'5", 260, not super athletic in terms of just speed off the snap kind of thing, but he's just a guy that gets home, moves around a lot. He's played around a bunch of different defensive line spots. I like his physicality. I like his power. I think he's got a very good toolbox of pass rush moves that he can use, so it's not like just a very raw athletic ball of clay that you got to mold. His pass rush upside, I think, was severely underrated by a lot of the pre-draft guys. Because that PFF moment really unlocked me. I'm like, okay, he is getting it. Because I remember watching him, like, I think he's getting home more than all these, he doesn't have a ton of pass rush upside, things would suggest. Barron, I feel like, might actually, because we don't know what the secondary is going to look like, so we don't know where Malachi Moore is really going to contribute right away. I think Barron immediately is maybe the third best edge rusher on this team. Because Will McDonald, obviously number 1, Jermaine Johnson number 2 in terms of getting to the quarterback. I mean, you look at this Jets depth chart here. Excuse me there.
It's not good.
At edge rusher, I mean, they got 2 good starters, but the backups are not particularly that good. So I think he plays. I mean, Eric Watts is going to take snaps away from him. Like, it's him and I think Michael Clemens are the immediate backups. If Jermaine Johnson were to miss a game, I think Tyler Barron is starting.
Wow.
Is that unreasonable?
I mean, they just have nobody else, so no. I still think they probably would give it to Clemens. I mean, I guess the new regime has no ties to him. We'll have to see how the new regime
Clemens probably defends the run a little better than Barron does, but
yes, and it maybe, look, Braden McGregor's still there, Eric Watts is still there. Maybe one of those guys takes a leap, and I'm not talking like leap like they're getting 10 sacks this year, but takes a leap to being like a viable rotation piece because neither really was that last year. I thought Watts was okay, McGregor not so much, but yeah, I mean, he's coming into a situation, Tyler Barron, that he has every chance to carve out a role for himself and earn a spot moving forward. You mentioned that he was a high-profile transfer portal recruit. He was. He spent 4 years at Tennessee. He was playing there alongside James Pierce, and he goes to Miami and didn't make quite the impact a lot of people thought. I will mention about the sack production. 3 of those 5.5 sacks, I believe, came in one game against Florida A&M.
That is correct.
So,
but there's still more outside of that. There's a lot of half sacks for him.
There is still more outside of that. And he also led Miami in sacks, despite just.
To be fair, Shamar Stewart had 4.5 sacks in college, and one of them was against Bowling Green.
Yes. Oh, I'm not. I mean, look, we're not comparing production to Shamar Stewart.
Can you imagine if he went 7?
No.
Well, thank God I remember, man.
That would be a D grade. Like that would warrant a D.
That would be what are we doing?
But yeah, I like Tyler Barron a lot. I think he's someone who can come in and immediately be a rotational piece, which is kind of what you're looking for. And yeah, I don't think there's any standout traits with him. I think the pass rush upside is fine, and he's not great against the run from what I've seen. I haven't watched a ton of Tyler Barron film.
He's not as good as he should be for being that big, but that seems like something you can work with as a coach.
He did have a decent amount of missed tackles last year too, and I think that's partly he had a good amount of pressure. It is interesting though that 10 sacks PFF counts in that. I got to watch. I want to see all 10 of those sacks because that's a huge discrepancy between that's a lot of half sacks. I want to see what those sacks actually look like.
I mean, to be fair, there were a couple like cleanup ones where just another guy after the guy held it forever. But
he's saying, look, if you're looking at PFF, 84.4 pass rush grade last year, 76.7 run defense grade is not bad either, and 9% run stop rate is roughly league average. So
the true pass rush set being a 90, I think, is very encouraging.
That is Bryce Huff-esque. That was what Bryce Huff was doing with the Jets. So yeah, I think he could be a rotational piece. Which if you're looking at day 3 guys, that's That's probably what you're asking. You're not hoping for him to be a starter, and they needed bodies there. They arguably still need some more. I don't think they've signed a true edge as a UDFA. They signed like a Jared Bartlett from Cincinnati. He was like a linebacker edge hybrid, but I don't think they really signed a true edge. So yeah, I think Barron absolutely can earn a spot this year.
The only real criticism I have of this draft class is that they didn't address defensive tackle at all.
Yeah.
And the only wide receiver being Arian Smith is not amazing either. But yeah, I get that they signed 3. I would have liked it, but I'm not going to bang and scream too loud because I like the players they picked so much.
I don't love that coming away from the draft. I feel like they did so much more in the secondary than front 7. I'd rather it been the reverse. I'd rather it been they kind of were weaker at corner and safety and did a lot more to beef up defensive line and even linebacker. But I'm not mad about the Malachi Moore and Azareye'h Thomas picks. And I wish they did more in the front 7, and the wide receiver room is not particularly great, but it's a good draft. It's a good draft. What would you grade it? Because you were mad about the B grade or whatever that it was given.
I would go B plus A-.
Yeah, I'm happy.
I'm not mad about the B grade. I'm mad that he gave it a B grade because the first 3 picks were A's. So you'd think if you weigh that, it should be an A. It's just him contradicting himself as well.
I am happy with a B plus with a potential to go higher. B plus just carried by those first really 2 picks I thought are just slam dunk.
Those are A every day.
Yeah, that is
like an A-.
That is what, if you ask a lot of Jets fans, and like a lot of Jets fans had that in mock drafts. It was like, hey, we're hoping we get Membu and Mason Taylor as the first 2 picks, and then they did. And then Azareye'h Thomas in round 3, great player.
No one thought he'd be there.
Value. So. People didn't think he'd be there. It's a weird fit just because of the players currently on the roster, but it's hard to be mad. And then Malachi Moore. Honestly, Malachi Moore to me, I feel like is going to be the X factor of this class. Like if he develops into a starter and is immediately like making an impact as a rookie, that might be an A- draft, maybe even higher. I mean, there's a chance the Jets got 4 long-term starters in this draft class, which I don't know what the other guys are going to develop into, but if you get 4 long-term starters, that's a great draft class.
Chris B gives this show an A+. Thank you, Chris.
Appreciate it. I don't know. Maybe more.
I want to sign off with one more question, though. I think we could kind of finally wrap up this draft analysis
here. What do you got?
If there's one undrafted free agent that you think is going to make an impact.
A lot of people are going to say Donovan Edwards.
Donovan Edwards is the big name, yeah.
That's the big name. I'm going to throw out a sneaky name.
And Brady Cook are the 2 big things in terms of interest.
Yeah. I think I'm going to throw out a sneaky name here. And I'm going to go Dymere Miller. Or no, you know what? No, sorry. No.
Isn't it Dymere Moore?
No, yeah, according to the Jets, it might be. No, I'm going to go actually.
Those that don't know, the Jets official account was very clearly looking at Justin's undrafted free agent tracker because he made a typo, and then multiple other people made the same typo in the same order.
They did. I only saw the Jets do that, which I think that's really funny. I want to make it very clear that it's not like I'm not upset. That it's not a call out. I think it's genuinely hilarious. Because I was looking at their tracker. I was like, they did the same mistake I did. That's got to be that can't be a coincidence. But no,
like an Anchorman where they make him like say stuff that's on the teleprompter.
Right. Yeah. The name I'm going to throw out, not Dymere Miller. It's going to be Jamal Pritchett, wide receiver, South Alabama. I think he's your Xavier Gibson of this year.
Senior Bowl guy. I'm surprised he didn't get picked.
I'm a little surprised he didn't get drafted. I get it though. 5'8", 175 pounds, but he was the leading receiver in the Sun Belt last year. Over 1,100 yards. Also 4.42 speed. Has experience punt returning. That's somebody who I think has a real chance to make the roster. If any of these UDFAs, and we'll probably talk about that more on Wednesday's show. Probably take a deeper dive into some of these UDFAs. There's a really fun German player that the Jets have signed. If you haven't checked him out, there's probably an article coming out in the Jet Press about him, but you can check out our tracker. We got a little bit of insight on him. But yeah, I'll give a shout out to Jamal Pritchett. I think he has a chance to be like the Greg Dortch of this year.
I'll go for the guy who was the highest rated player that was left on my big board that the Jets got. And I know they loaded up on secondaries, but I'm looking at Dean Clark for Fresno State. A guy who, I'm very surprised Dean Clark was not drafted. Super duper great athlete over at Fresno State. He was listed at about 6'2", 206, 41-inch vertical jump. That's insane.
Yeah.
4.48 40-yard dash, 4.13 short shuttle. Great athlete, covers well, will hit you. A guy that I thought would be a perfect like day 3 flyer, and then nobody took him. So I'm like, okay.
That's
like if they didn't take Malachi Moore, they should have taken Dean Clark. But now they got both of them.
Yeah, it's another guy I was watching because the Jets brought him in for a top 30. So I was not surprised at all when they signed him as a UDFA. I was like, this makes sense. Also, over 700 career special team snaps. Played a lot of college. Former Kent State. Shout out Golden Flashes.
He could be the Tony Adams, the new Tony
Adams.
Adams.
Could be the Tony Adams. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll dive more into UDFAs on Wednesday's show, and then I'm going away. I'm not going to be here the week after that. So we'll.
Where are you heading?
Going to Peru and Bolivia. I think have I told you about that.
This guy, geez.
I told you about that. Yeah, last year I did like the Malaysia thing. I do this every year where I save up my money and PTO all year, and then go after the draft. Kind of that's our downtime is after the draft. So I take a little 1 to 2 week vacation. So I'll be gone for like 2 weeks. So you'll probably see some Mike Jirapuda. I don't know. We haven't even asked him yet, but if he's around, we'll probably get him.
And he is.
Yeah.
Chris B, I wish we signed Jared Ivey. He tested so badly.
Mm-hmm. It was surprising he wouldn't drafted. I figured he would get drafted. Who signed him?
Nobody yet.
Nobody has signed him?
Because he tested so bad.
Who's that? No, he's going to Seattle.
Oh, he did? He did? Okay.
I was going to say, no shot. Nobody signed
him. He didn't sign for a while. Like, he was in that first initial wave. I'm like, that's weird.
He was all SEC last year.
Damn.
Anyway, let's wrap it up. Mike, you have any final thoughts before we call it quits on our first ever Monday show?
I'm happy that we got Mason Taylor.
I am too. Mike says I like Quentin Skinner, 6'5". Yeah, he was he Kansas, right? He was
Kansas, yeah, rock chalk, baby.
That's another one to looking at. I think he's like listed at like 6'3" and a little under 6'4". I think I saw Jordan Schultz and they called him 6'5". I think he was like 6'3" something at his pro day. But yeah, we'll talk more on him. We'll talk about some of these UDFA guys on Wednesday's show. And until then, thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Mike on Twitter at Luciano. Follow me on Twitter, Justin Fried. Follow Jet Press at the Jet Press. Download the Jet Press podcast where you get podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, hit the notification bell. You could also become a member today. It is 99 cents. It's a great way to get your comments prioritized in chat, and it's a great way to help support the show. We stream live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, thank you all for listening to the Jet Press podcast. I've been Justin Fried. That is Mike Luciano. We'll see you guys on Wednesday.
Shout out the Mooj, man.